report and getting involved in the upcoming work. It is important to reflect on the La Raza Research Report as we develop a plan that will improve the lives for our Latino students in DPS. I call on everyone to do this work in tandem with the work of the Dr. Sharon Bailey report. The initiatives that resulted after the Bailey report continue to be critical to our success in Denver Public Schools, and we need to do both well and fully and successfully. Yo me dedico a ese trabajo como la presidenta de la mesa directiva y como una ex maestra. En mi commitment. Yeah. Bueno, estoy haciendo bien, pero bueno, gracias. Debo de mirarte a ti. En mi compromiso, me gustaría pedir a todas las personas de las escuelas públicas de Denver que se junten conmigo en leer este reportaje tan importante y que se involucren en el trabajo que viene. Es importante reflejar en las investigaciones que sale de la raza reportaje y desarrollar un plan que va a mejorar la vida de nuestros alumnos latinos en DPS. También pido a todos que hagan ese trabajo junto con el reportaje de la doctora Sharon Bailey. Las cosas que salieron de ese reportaje también siguen siendo muy críticos para nuestro éxito como DPS. Tenemos que hacer los dos muy bien y con todas nuestras almas. Finally, as I reflected on what I might say today, I thought of the first principal that I had in 1985 and how grateful she would be for what we're doing here today. The late Dr. Marta Orioste was a champion for multilingual education and an active member of the Congress of Hispanic Educators for 51 years. I know she's looking down on us today and she's proud of the work that we have done. También cuando estaba pensando hoy en lo que iba a decir hoy, pensé en la primera directora que tenía yo en el 1985, la señora doctora Marta Orioste. Ella siempre luchaba para los derechos de los niños multilingües y era un miembro del Congreso de los Educadores Hispanos por 51 años. Y yo sé que ella está aquí con nosotros, mirando y estando muy orgulloso de nosotros. Muchas gracias por estar aquí hoy. Thank you very much for being here today. And now I'd like to introduce Vice President De La Rosa.
Good morning and buen día. I am Marlene De La Rosa, Vice President of the School Board. Yo soy Marlene De La Rosa, Vicepresidente de la Mesa Directiva. Thank you so much for being here with us today. Gracias por estar aquí con nosotros hoy. I would like to express my gratitude to the researchers, to the participants, and to Dr. Marrero for the work on the La Raza Report. Me gustaría expresar mi agradecimiento a los investigadores, participantes y al doctor Marrero por el trabajo en el informe La Raza. I am filled with so much hope today for the release of the La Raza Report, not only for our students and our families, but also for our teachers, our school leaders, and our administrative staff. Estoy llena de esperanza hoy por la publicación del informe de la raza, no solo para nuestros estudiantes y familias, sino también para nuestros maestros, líderes escolares y personal administrativa. I am especially excited for the establishment of a Latino Student Initiative. I'm also excited as to how we can use these recommendations to support and address the needs of our DPS Latino community and our newly arrived students and families. As the former chair of LEAC, I know that the work that is being done today is so impactful for our Latinx and Hispanic students and our community. As a Latina, as a parent, as a lifelong community member, I have dedicated much of my life and my heart in service to elevating the lives of those in the Latino community. Now, in my role as board member, I will continue my service, and I am committed to work in collaboration with the community groups and the DPS community for greater success of our Latino students. When our Latino students succeed, all of our students succeed. Cuando nuestros estudiantes latinos triunfan, todos nuestros estudiantes triunfan. And I too, like Dr. Olson, I am asking all of you to step forward and to see how you can partner, that we can work together to support the Latino students in our community. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Buenos dias. Thank you for joining us in this historic moment for the Latino, Mexicano, Chicano community in DPS. My name is Xochitl Gaitan. I was the first Mexican-born president of the DPS Board of Education from November 2021 to November of 2023. I'm currently director of District 2, Southwest Denver. Due to my limited time right now, I'm going to share just a few words in Spanish and I'll go back to English. Buenos días a todos. Gracias por habernos acompañado en este momento tan histórico para nuestra comunidad latina, mexicana, chicana dentro de DPS. Me llamo Xochitl Gaitan y yo fui la primera presidente de la mesa directiva de DPS que nació en México. Y mi presidencia fue de noviembre del 2021 a noviembre del 2023. Hoy día sigo como directora del Distrito 2 en el suroeste de Denver. I was about 3.5 years old when my mother embarked on a dangerous journey to cross the border from Juárez, Chihuahua, Mexico, to El Paso, Texas. And it was because she had lost the baby that was born before I was and the baby that was born after me. She was in desperate need of health care as she found herself pregnant again. She also was desperate for public services for herself and for me. And that included free public education. We arrived in Denver, Colorado. I started kindergarten at Knapp Elementary School in Southwest Denver. Went on to graduate from Lincoln High School in Southwest Denver, and then earned a Bachelor of Science in Business Management from Metropolitan State University of Denver, which is now, as of only a couple of years ago, an HSI, a Hispanic Serving Institution. My story was the story of just a small percentage of DPS students, DPS Latinos back then, and now it's a much larger percentage. As you will see as you comb through the La Raza Report, due to gentrification, segregation, and other issues, DPS used to have about 60, maybe even 70% of Latino, Mexicano, Chicano students. And that has dwindled down to about 50%. I stand here proudly representing and speaking with and for my community. Our Latinidad binds us through language, culture, our skin color, the different shades of brown, family values, music, and all the beautiful things that hold dear to our heart. The DPS Board of Education and Superintendent Dr. Marrero now have an opportunity to work with policy such as language justice work, culturally responsive curricula, anti-bullying efforts, and so forth to create the necessary change to strengthen equity within this institution to protect and provide the highest quality education for my community. And just as my mother embarked on her journey and took the necessary risks to find opportunities for public goods and public services, you too can embark on this new DPS journey. And together, through our Latinidad, we together will take those mitigated risks and we will reach for equity in all parts of this system for our Latino and our Latinx community. Gracias.
Bravo, Xochitl!
I make myself available to Spanish-speaking media. Para los medios de español, me voy a hacer disponible después para entrevista en español. Now I would like to introduce the man.
The man.
The man who moved swiftly to commission La Raza Report without any hesitation. An Afro-Latino himself, our DPS Superintendent, Dr. Alex Marrero.
Muchas gracias, directora Gaitán. Voy a comenzar en español y después en inglés. Pero primeramente, I want to highlight the other members of the board who are also here in support. Directora Kimberly Cia. El director Scott Esserman. Y el director John Young. Saludos a todos. El orgulloso superintendente de las escuelas públicas de Denver, Alexis Marrero, el hijo de Mirta Carmen de la Altagracia Espinal, de Montecristi, la República Dominicana, y el hijo de Manuel Marrero, de Jalabana, Cuba. Aquí estamos, un día increíble, emocionante, para escuchar las conclusiones del informe de la raza en un grupo de investigadores de lo máximo que tenemos, los premios, socios externos que ahora son socios internos, para mejorar el sistema nuestro. Es muy fácil señalar, decir, haz un trabajo mejor, señor. Muy fácil, pero más difícil señalar a nosotros mismos. Y eso es lo que nosotros hicimos con ese informe. Esas recomendaciones son vitales para el trabajo que se necesita aquí para mejorar la experiencia de los estudiantes, los adultos y del sistema. Si saben de las planes estratégicas, eso mismo es lo que detalla. Estudiantes, los adultos y el sistema. Nuestro sistema, DPS, es un distrito de acción. Tomó acción la mesa directiva sobre el reporte de la señora, la doctora Sharon Bailey, con resoluciones y planes para éxito para nuestra comunidad afroamericana. Igual, hoy vamos a hacer lo mismo. Nuestro distrito es un distrito de acción. Nosotros tomamos acción cuando creamos el departamento de éxito de los afroamericanos, que comenzó hace unos cuantos meses. Igual, ahora tenemos un semejante departamento para el éxito estudiantil de los Latinx, Latin estudiantes. En breve voy a introducir, a darle la bienvenida al investigador principal, pero ahora va a hacer unas cuantas palabras en inglés. You all know, proud superintendent, and when I say proud superintendent, it's not just because it's a nice catchphrase, it's an absolute honor being the son of a refugee and an immigrant that I was given the opportunity to impact change. When I say impact change, not just the 90,000 roughly, it's hundreds of thousands because I'm looking at all of you as well. So if you do simple math, you multiply that by 1, maybe 1.5, in best cases 2 or more. It's not everyone. I know I didn't have 2 at home, right? We're speaking about hundreds of thousands. So this is truly a call of action. And yes, I'm a little bit paced in my remarks because I'm trying my best not to show how emotional this is. So we're here to share the findings of the Raza Report. When I mentioned it's the easiest thing in the world, my wife says that all the time, is to point and say, you can do better. It requires no effort to be a critic. It requires a tremendous amount of effort and self-reflection to say and point that finger to yourselves as a system, and even more so to say, okay, there is a problem, let's try to fix it. All right, so this is my request, very respectfully, let's try to fix it. Now, we can point, and now we have evidence, and even more so a roadmap, thanks to our researchers. So this honors truly the notion of what we coined of getting better at getting better. And there are some highlights in our system, and that cannot be disputed. Right? But the gaps have been persistent. The late, great Dr. Sharon Bailey said it so beautifully. I know, Dr. Olson, you also echo these words. Equity, which is plastered all over our school buildings, has remained elusive in our system. So when are we going to grab it? When are we going to call it out? And more importantly, what are we going to do to ensure that whatever we grabbed the inequity and disparities never happen again before our tenure as a Board of Education, as an administration. DPS is a district of action, so kudos and what drove me to this incredible district, to the Board of Education with the Black Excellence Resolution, Black Excellence Plans, the creation of our Black Student Success Team. So we also swiftly as an administration acted immediately. We're complementing that with the creation of our Latinx, Latin Success, and you heard Vice President De La Rosa say that she chaired the once LEAC, defunct LEAC, and during my time, we had to resurrect that based on absolute need, based on my exploration of the community's needs, but also deep desire of our Latinx community. So I want to ensure that everyone in our community knows that I'm going to share some of your words if I can, Director Gaitán, that the liberation of our most marginalized communities are tied together.
That's right.
So the great work that has happened, albeit sluggish, creation of Black Family Advisory Councils, the creation of everything that is the Black Excellence Resolution and how it lives in our schools. This is not a next chapter of the book.
That's right.
Right? I often go downstairs where my office is and I open up a very tattered, incredibly written dissertation that I still have in my office. Thank you, John Bailey, who has given me that permission, and see where that Bailey report came from her, the late great Dr. Sharon Bailey's dissertation. So what was missing was a complement to that. We heard that some of us in the attendance were around for those West High School walkouts, which tomorrow we're going to celebrate is the 53 years of when it happened. We can easily argue that we have had a roadmap all along, right? But now I'm doing exactly what I'm asking you all not to do. Let's not point fingers and say, you know what? Let's base it on research. Let's base it on the lived experience of the students that are in our classrooms. You're going to hear some of that. Let's base it on the lived experience and the impact of the communities that have been historically underserved. How about that? All right? And there's some things that are hard to read, but I'm accepting them. And I ask you all to accept it as well. So this is a monumentous moment in our system. Let's not let it pass us. So this is a call for more than just criticism, more than just critical friends. This is a call for true collaboration and empowerment.
Yes.
And that means that if you're all going to be empowered, I am prepared to relinquish the appropriate amount of power because we're community served. So thank you for that. And now I have the absolute pleasure to bring up our principal investigator, the Dr. Steve Del Castillo.
All right, Steve.
Good morning. And buenos dias. First thing I want to do is I want to apologize for I'm overcoming a cold. So please excuse me. So for those of you that remember the Little Rascals, remember Froggy? That's who I am at Froggy for today. Anyway, thank you very much, Dr. Marrero. Thank you very much for the board. It's a real pleasure to be here. Thank you for the opportunity to share with you what we've done. But before I do that, I would like to introduce our distinguished researchers over here at the table. We had an incredible team, as you might imagine. And those of you that know the educational community, you'll recognize just about everybody here. I'd like to introduce them first, starting with Dr. Kathy Escamilla. Dr. Escamilla is a professor emeritus from the Bueno Center at the University of Colorado in Boulder and a distinguished researcher. She's known all over the country in the area of bilingual education. So thank you, Kathy. Next to Kathy is Alex Haig. Alex is our data scientist. He's the quantitative guru. He's the one that put together all the pieces around our quantitative model that you will see in the report. And I'll explain more about that in just a minute. So I'd like to introduce Alex. Next to Alex is Dr. Ramon del Castillo. And Ramon is the retired chair of the Chicano Studies Department at Metropolitan State University. Also was the director of the nonprofit management program at Regis University. So Dr. del Castillo. Next is Dr. Luis Torres. Dr. Torres is retired also from the Chicano Studies Department as the chair. He is our, and we used to tease him a little bit, his PhD is in English. He calls himself an English professor. I said, no, you're a professor of English. There's a difference, you know. And we should tease him. And he's too shy to be up here today at the table, but I do want to introduce Dr. Manuel Escamilla, who is also Dr. Escamilla was the person who conducted our Spanish language interviews that you're going to hear more about. So thank you, Manuel. When we were provided the award of the contract, the one thing that the research question that we addressed was, what are the barriers and opportunities of Latino students, parents, and staff within Denver Public Schools? It's a pretty broad question. So in order to do that, what we did is we broke down, and one of the things that we also did was to look at, with the distinguished group that we have, obviously, as you might imagine, there are different approaches that we thought we could take. But we thought the most productive approach would be that we really wanted to divide the study into three parts. The first part is the historical analysis. And the reason that's important is because everything we do today is really a result of history. And things don't happen in a vacuum. We live as a result of policies, social, economic, political actions within our community. We thought it was very important. I'm going to come back to that. The second component that we had is a quantitative component. Of course, there's what Alex and I worked on. That's part of my background too. So we worked on that together. Then the third component was the qualitative component that focused on focus groups and a survey. Now, when we looked at the historical analysis, one of the things that we did is we looked at 10 decades of history in Denver, 100 years. But the reason I break it down into decades is because if you look at the different decades, the 1920s, for example, where the Ku Klux Klan was here in Denver, essentially kind of terrorizing the streets. The 1930s, when we had the redlining that was authorized by the federal government and, quite frankly, by title persons in the title mortgage companies. And you'll see when you read the report the links that tie that to direct documents and the language that was used to discriminate. In the 40s, of course, we had the Second World War. Everybody kind of took a break from these areas. In the 1950s, of course, we had Brown versus Board of Education. So the 20s and the 30s were areas around discrimination, etc. In the 1950s, with Brown versus Board, we began to look at some kind of relief. 1960s, of course, we see the civil rights movement that occurred within Denver, and looking at the federal legislation, and quite frankly, the Latino civil rights groups that were here in Denver, but also the community activism that was addressed by Dr. Olson and the activity that was happening then. Then we look at the 1970s, and of course, then we get the Keys case, as you all know. And many of the civil rights activities that were happening. In the 1980s, you get the IRCA, the Immigration Reform Control Act, that essentially, quote, legitimized Latino families in the country. In the 1990s, of course, then we see more activity, of course, the end of busing within Denver Public Schools. And then as we turned the century, beginning to look at the influx of immigrants as we're seeing now, et cetera. That we thought was very important in terms of laying out a foundation and providing a context. I'm a strong believer in context. And that allowed us to understand why we're here where we are now. In the quantitative area, 4 areas that we looked at, one were enrollment patterns, as you're going to see in the report. Obviously, decrease in Latino families and enrollment within DPS, but then a decline. And we'll talk about why. Proficiency results that look at scores for all students in the standardized area, standardized scores. And then we looked at academic achievement and looked at the differences among different groups within DPS. And then we also had a stakeholder survey where we were able to get over 3,000 respondents to that, as you'll see in the report. Now, we put all this together because what we wanted to do is we wanted to integrate statistical measurement, because of course that's the traditional way of doing research. But we also wanted to introduce culture, and we also wanted to introduce policy. How do you tie all those pieces together? The history, the numbers, the data, the feedback, which is really important. How do you put all those together into some kind of policy, as Dr. Madero says, moving forward? And one of the things that we have, the concept of a crossroads, that is, we're here as a community, we're here as DPS. Because one of the things that we also looked at is really the relationship between DPS and the city and county of Denver. It's interesting. Both the city and county of Denver was approved in 1902. DPS became a consolidated district in 1902. So they're on parallel tracks. So the question is, how do we as a broader community work together to be able to provide the kinds of services and support and experience for all students, and focusing especially on Latino students and families. And then finally, we came up with 35 recommendations broken out by groups. And we think that those recommendations, and one of the major recommendations is in fact a Latino student strategic initiative. We think that's going to kind of set the stage for the overall effort over the next few years. So that's kind of the 30,000-foot level description of the project. So we have 3 documents. We have the main document, main report. It's about 250 pages. We have a supplemental section that's about 140 pages, and then we have the executive summary. I assume it sounds like some of you probably have already had a chance to see that. But we again are grateful, our team is grateful for the chance to participate in this, we think, in this monumental and historical project. And most importantly for us, and I think I can speak for all of my team members, we really hope that this is a chance for DPS and City and County of Denver to be able to say, we now know where we're going. We're at the crossroads. We're going to make the right decisions. And years from now, people are going to look back and say, that was a differentiating point for DPS, and most importantly, for the Latino community. So, thank you. Questions?
Thank you, everyone. We're now going to be taking questions for the researchers or anyone on the panel using this microphone. Who would like to go first? Yes.
And I don't mind who, oh, sorry. I'm Ashley Michaels, Fox 31 Channel 2. I don't mind who takes this, but what is the most surprising thing that you found?
It's on. Okay. At least for me, probably the most surprising thing, actually a couple of things. One is obviously in the focus groups, the fact that the parents and students and community members were really willing to share their experiences, positive as well as not so positive. One of the things that we found is that, especially with the immigrant families, that they were very positive about the experience in DPS. They felt like, yes, we have a chance to have some input. They'd like more, of course, but of course, at least somebody saying, we want to hear your input, in our schools, etc. And probably that's from the focus groups. And probably the other thing that surprised, I think, Alex and me, were the numbers, as you're going to see, the students that were scoring below expectations over the last, since 2015, when they moved from TCAP to CMAS. So those are probably, for me at least, the surprising points.
I would just like to mention for me, what was surprising was what we call the Latinization of the Denver public schools. Yo soy mexicano, I'm Mexican Chicano, and that was generally what the group was. But as we started doing the focus groups with the students, it dawned on me that there were students from all kinds of Latin American countries that we're going to have to serve. And what I would say is, we don't want to happen to them what happened to us, that they were forgot about in the literature and in the history. So we pushed for legislation for the last 5 years to offer them something that they could learn about themselves and become part of the community.
It's validated. It validated a tremendous amount. But if I had to pick one, it's related to cultural dissonance. It was painful to hear or read, I should say, the lived experience of some of our Latino students who, even amongst their Latino groups, really around the sense of belonging or lacking the sense of belonging. And of course, when you look at our other disenfranchised, historically underserved populations as well. So that was painful. That was painful because it's something that it's a reality and it shouldn't be. So that was more of a pain point as opposed to an aha.
We have a question in the back.
Hola, soy Karen del semanario.